All right, we're back. We are MAPD124. That's Advanced iOS Development, and we are week 9, part 3 of our broadcast in the winter 2017 semester at Centennial. And I just want to finish a little bit of it. I don't think I have time to finish everything else. The great thing is I have put this up on GitHub for you, the final result. That's why I did this ahead of time. That's what took a lot of my time, which is this part. This is the final version that I've created so far. Is it final? There's still more things you can do with this one. There's, for example, I haven't created a end scenario where the game ends. And you can do that. You can say, well, if the game is over, then now finish the scene. Go back to the game view controller. And then from the game view controller, you can also make it so that there's a bit of a finite state machine. So you can kind of say, well, if my scene is over, you can test to see if the amount of points or whatever I have or life is low, then start off a new scene. Go to a segue to another scene. We can talk about that. But for now, so we didn't do that part. But this part here, lesson 9, where we are right now, we've got some of it working. But one thing to make a game, there's 2 parts actually to make a good game. One is randomization, which we got some of. It's not perfect. We got some of it. We can fix the randomization another time, right? The other part that makes a game is collisions. There has to be a way of you detecting that you're colliding or picking up things or whatever. Without using physics, because Sprite Kit comes with some physics, we can use physics-like collisions. Here, where there's no physics, it's just a top-down kind of game where we can add shooting and stuff later on, right? I want to add a manager called the collision manager. So let's do that. So add new file, right? New Cocoa Touch class. And we're going to call this, it's not going to be a self-class of anything, but I'll leave it as a game object. So collision manager. Right. My collision manager is not going to be import, for now, won't import UI kit, right? In fact, it won't even, kind of extend any other class. It'll just be another class. Like this. Collision manager. That's one thing I need. And I'm just going to put them up here, somewhere a little higher. Oop, not there. Here. And my collision manager.swift, I'm going to wrap it in a new group that I'm going to call managers. Right? One of them is going to be the collision manager. The other thing I want is another object that I want to create. So I'm going to make a new file. And my other object is going to be a Cocoa Touch class. Or it could be a Swift file. Doesn't really matter. Let's use a Swift file for now. I'm going to call this thing distance. Okay. Not going to do this. What it's going to do is it's going to be an extension class, right? It's going to be an extension of CGPoint. But here's the problem. I don't have access to CGPoint unless I import or graphics. So I'm going to extend CGPoint, and here's my public class that I want to make, which is a function, and I'm going to call this thing the distance format. And what my distance is going to be is going to take 2 CG points. One is going to be point 1, which is going to be CGPoint. And then I'm also going to take a point 2, which is also going to be CGPoint, right? And it's going to return CGFloat. Okay. So what I want to get is the distance between two points. And if you guys remember the formula for that, right? It is, we're going to return the square root of, right? And I'm going to use the power of p2.x minus p1.x, right, to the power of 2, right, plus power of p2.y minus p1.y another bracket around that. Do this right. Power. I'm missing a bracket. Hold on a second. Power of 2. And close that off. So I'm getting the a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, right? So this is like, p2, the second point, x minus 1. So x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And then take the square root of that. And that's going to be the distance between the 2 points. This is calculate distance between 2 points. That's going to be my extension class. Right? So that's why it's going to extend CGPoint. Right? So CGPoint's already a class. It's just going to extend it and add this little function for me. Okay, if that's true, then I can check for it now inside of my collision manager. So my collision manager, if I go here, I want to declare an initializer. I don't need it for now, right? And I'm also going to have a start method. I don't need right now. I will need later. And I'm also going to have an update method, which I don't need right now, but I will need later, right? I don't need a reset, and I don't need a check bounce. So I'm not going to make it a game object type, right? And they both need to be functions. I also need to call start from init, although I'm not going to need to yet. Stuff.start. And what I'm going to do is have another function, which is going to be public static function, which is going to be called CheckCollision. I'm going to check collision between 2 points, right? Or 2 objects, actually. Object 1, which is going to be of type game object, and object 2, which is going to be a type game object. Why game object? Why not plane and island? Because this way I could have multiple objects that I'm checking. All of them are game objects, right? Because I've cast them as game objects, they have has a relationship or is a relationship with game object. Even though they're island and plane and everything else, they're all game objects. So therefore, I can check to see, I can use any game object in there. Gives me more flexibility, right? I'm making it public static because I don't care to initialize or instantiate a collision manager yet. Later on, I may. For now, I'm not going to. All right. And if I do, I can always call CheckCollision without using the collision manager itself. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to check to see if, right, CGPoint distance. Now again, I can't use CGPoint distance unless I inherit from, I import core graphics, right? If CGPoint distance, and if you notice, if I open it up, the brackets, it's going to say CGPoint to CGPoint. Let me try this out here. So let's try this. So CGPoint distance. Here it is. And how come it's not showing me the distance formula that I want? Time for bed, Tom. I don't know who programmed that in. But that's what I want. I want my CGPoint distance to do that, to kind of run, right? Which is I have a distance between point 1, which is my object, right? Which is my game object 1 dot position, right? That's my point 1. And then point 2 is my object 2 dot position. If my CGPoint is less than, right, object 1 dot half height, why I use the half height stuff. Remember I talked about using half height? Plus object 2 dot half height. Then I have a collision. But here's the problem. It says use of instance member distance on a type CG point. Did you mean to use the value of type CG point instead? How come it's not working? Well, because of my distance formula, my distance thing is public func distance, right? And I think I got to do something else in here to make it, is it static? I don't think I need to make it that. Let's just check. All right, I'm running out of time, so I got to check it out. I already did this today. Figured it out. So that will be under distance. There it is. So I did public static. Yeah, you're right. Public static. And I need to make this public extension too. Public extension. See, so let me see if that does it by itself. Fix dictionary, no. And public static. There we go. That does it. And if I go back to this, then I should be good. Value, CG float not unwrapped. Did you mean to use da 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 da? Yeah, sure. Yep. And same thing here, probably. Make sense? So what this does is it checks the distance between, so CheckCollision says pass in two game objects, object 1 and object 2, and then check the distance between the positions. If the positions is less than object 1's half the height of object 1, because we're doing top-down collision, because of the objects are coming from the top, it's easier for me just to do the half the height, right? Half the height means it's like going to be half the height from the middle of the object to the edge, and half the height. If it's less than that, right? And if it's less than the distance between the centers, that means it's got to be here like this, right? Which chances are means there's a collision, right? So if that's true, then I want to check the names. I want to say, well, if this is a collision, then let's print a collision, right? Collision. There's a problem here that we're going to have in a second. There's a problem, right? Okay, so this is what I want to do. I want to check collisions. And I want to do this in my play scene, right, during my update. So I update and then check collisions. And I want to check for two different things. I want to say, well, when I'm coming to here, I want to say collision manager dot check collision. I'm going to pass in my first game object, which is going to be my island sprite, or my plane sprite, and my island sprite, right? There's my two game objects, right? And then, of course, I'm going to have to unwrap them. So might as well unwrap this one too. So I'm checking the distance between, one and the other one. If they have, I have a collision, okay? And then in my clouds, for each of my clouds, I want to do the same thing too, but I want to do it in the loop. So I want to say collision manager dot check collision between my plane sprite and my cloud, right? And I want to unwrap my plane sprite. So this will calculate if either one of them, and now this is happening every frame. That means 60 times a second, I'm checking the distance between objects. Doesn't matter where they are on the screen. And some of you might say, well, this is bad because that means, like, what if they're totally far away from each other? You're checking the distance, checking the distance, checking the distance. Yeah, and some people say, what if you make a zone? So if they come down below a certain point, like if they come below, because remember that my plane is locked at 50 pixels or 50 points, right? When do I check when it's closer? And if I did that, what would happen would be this. It would be really, really fast until I got to 50, and it would slow right down. So it would have inconsistent speed. It would be really fast and slow, and really fast and slow. And it's way better to have crappy speed the whole way than to have inconsistent speed up and down. So always check is the answer. For now. We can maybe improve that later. All right, so again, one way of doing things. Could we use AABB collision here? Absolutely. Not as accurate when it comes to the corners. But we can also use other kinds of collision checking as well. Right? Like separated axis theorem. But that's just crazy for this little thing. Okay, let's just run this thing and then see if I get collisions when I run them over. And we're going to see a problem with this. And I know I'm running overtime, but I want to show you this and then fix it, and then we're done. Okay, so here's my plane, and it's coming down. And if I kind of run over this thing and get collision, but I get a lot of them. Look, here's my collision, and I get a lot more, and I get a lot more, and I get a lot more. Why? Because I'm colliding for every frame that we're moving through the cloud. That's bad. That means I'm going to get really weird sounds, and I want to only collide once. As long as I'm colliding, I don't want to count. I don't want to count a collision as when I start colliding. I only want to count it one time, not every time I'm passing through the cloud. So otherwise, I'm going to say collisions for a bunch of frames before I pass through the cloud. An example would be this, right? 1, 2, 3 collisions, let's say, right there, because I passed through the cloud, maybe more, right? So what I want to do is inside of my game object superclass, I want to create another instance variable, which is called isCollision. So I can say isCollision, which is of type bool, right? And by default, I'm going to say that I'm not colliding. So I'm going to say self.isCollision, right, is equal to false. That make sense? So I'm just keeping track, am I colliding or not? All right. So now that I've got that in there, I can check for it. I can say that, well, you know what? My collision manager in here can say, okay, cool. I want to register a collision only if I'm not colliding. So I'm going to do one of these. I'm going to say, if, we'll just say object 1 first. If object 2, right, dot is colliding, right? So if it's not true, if not object 2 is colliding, it's kind of a negative. I'm not colliding with my object, right? Then I want to say, I want to check to see what kind of object it is. If my object2 dot name is equal to island, right? Then I want to do something, right? Otherwise, that's why I need the name. If my object2 dot name is equal to cloud, I want to do something else, right? And then what if it's one of these scenarios, then I got to set my colliding. I got to set object2 dot is colliding to true, right? Because if I'm not colliding, now I am, right? So I don't want to come back here and check again. And I'm just going to kind of unwrap this one. Okay. And then what about when I'm not colliding? If I didn't collide, then I'm not colliding. So therefore I can say else I'm not colliding. If this fails, this check fails, so I'm not that close, then you know what? My object 2 then obviously is colliding is equal to false. So this is where I reset it. Okay. Does that make sense? So I'm checked to see if the distance is close enough. If it is, check to see if my object 2 is already colliding. If it's not already colliding, check to see which object it is. Is it an island or a cloud? If it's an island, you know, as an example, add points. I'm not going to do it now, right? You can see it online. And if it's a cloud, subtract a life. Right? And we haven't set those up yet, but that's what I would do, right? And to show you that it works, just really quickly before you go, I'm going to go print island. It's going to print the island only when it collides with the island, and it's going to print cloud out to the debugger once I kind of go over that. Okay, and that's your collision. If I have that, I can calculate points, and I can have a winning condition and a losing condition. If I have a winning condition and a losing condition, I have a game. Right? Let's try this out, or at least the beginnings of one. All right, so here it is. If I did everything correctly. So here I am. I'm running, and if I collide with, I should only collide once, right? So cloud, right? See that? I don't get more than one. Cloud. Island. See that? That's the way it was going to be. So if I want to make sounds, right? Cloud, cloud, cloud. I only collide one time, and that's the right thing to do. So I could make subtractive life, right? make a positive noise, right? Yay, right? Make a negative noise. I can do that here for this. And again, if you wanted to see the completed version, I recommend you do look up online for the final version that I've kind of put up, which is MAPD124 mail pilot. Thank you. Any questions for the people that are here before I go and before we stop? I know we kind of ran over time a little bit, but I want to show you this whole part. So you have, again, the building blocks of making a game, and this is Sprite Kit. So we kind of have to do this. You know, for the next time, we're going to do more of this kind of API stuff. So you have a bunch of different options to create your final projects. Okay, that's it for me. We'll see you next week. I expect to have some kind of assignment coming up, right? Because we need to do another assignment at some point. I don't want to overburden you, but there's got to be something else. Okay? Probably going to be a game. Make a game, you know, because I've shown you how to do this, and I've probably shown you more of this, you know, and think about combining this with something like, if you really wanted to, you can combine this game with Firebase, where you keep track of high scores on the Firebase, right? Where you do a bunch of other stuff. You communicate with other users. You have multiple players, and they're playing on the same game, right? Lots of stuff that can be done. All right, so I'm just going to stop recording, and I'll put this up on GitHub, the part that we've got done.